You know, I think I've shared before that I have always been a fan of political convention season. I have, it's true. Other people had dates in the summertime, not me. I've always been a fan of political convention season. Starting when I was 10 years old in 1980, my grandmother and I would watch gavel-to-gavel coverage of both conventions. And quite often, during the big speeches, people would call to check in. For me, then, the whole idea of live blogging during major events or following a hashtag on Twitter, I mean, that's great, but it doesn't hold a candle to watching TV with my grandmother, having the phone ring, and watching her, just sort of take a long drag from her Camel Light and then drop a little truth bomb on whoever it was on the other end of the phone. It was great. But the thing of all of the conventions that I loved the most every year was the roll call of the states. Do you remember the roll call of the states? The big moment when the conventions kind of make it official and whoever the winner of the primaries has been becomes, in a formal way, the nominee. I loved how kind of mom and pop that was. Do you remember? You remember? No matter how telegenic and carefully scripted the people on the podium were, the roll call of the states was always much more like a celebration of regular folks that you might actually know. People were sweating and nervous, and they'd be there sort of standing there with the mic trying to elect the next leader of the free world, and then the guy next to them would be in a hat made out of foam elephants, and he'd be like, "Yeah!" And they would always say things like, "Madam Secretary, the great state of Ohio, the Buckeye State, the home of the Scarlet Carnation and the cardinal home of the Wright brothers, birthplace of rock and roll, and 7 Republican presidents and 1 Whig, and a great home for a new superconductor super collider, casts its votes for the next president of the United States." Whew. Well, I loved that. What I loved, though, even more was that, the next week the other party would have its convention, and at the exact same moment, like someone who looked like the identical twin of the first guy would get up and give almost exactly the same speech, except instead of the Republican president's part, they would be like, "Home of 1 Whig president and the senator of senators, John Glenn." And you couldn't help but realize that people across the country, we might disagree. And for all the emphasis on what makes the parties different, and for all the emphasis that political consultants place on drawing contrasts between their particular candidate and the other person, by and large, people were part of the same country, and they agreed on all kinds of things. There was this way in which you just knew that when those Ohio delegations got back home from their respective conventions, they were working more closely than they were oppositely, for all the differences. And I loved that. I loved the power of that reminder. It broke my heart a little bit that the roll call of the states last time was not in prime time, and I'm sure I think I'm probably the only person left who still loves the roll call of the states. So the idea that they would shift it makes sense to me, but gosh, I feel like that lesson of regular folks coming together and of people across the country far more united than we are distinct, it would be so, so powerful right now. And so I can't help but lament that it doesn't seem like this time through they're going to do it that way. You know, there were a lot of, many years ago in the Protestant Reformation, which was a time, as you probably remember, of, not that you were there, you probably learned in school. The Protestant Reformation was a time of violent disagreement throughout Europe. And one of the great mottos to come out of that time as a kind of plea for a different way of living, not simply within one version of what it is to be Christian, but for all Christians, came to be this. It was this slogan, which you may have heard. It goes, "In essentials, unity. In non-essentials, liberty. In all things, charity." In Latin, it is even more impressive. But in any case, in essentials, unity. In non-essentials, liberty. In all things, charity. And it was a plea from within the family of faith to remember to find common ground. And I guess I would just say that that used to feel truer of our political life too. Right now, unity and charity in particular seem in such short supply. And I find myself so worried that that is the case. Well, what does this have to do with faith? You heard two readings this morning, and the first was from Romans. The second was from Isaiah, from the Hebrew Scriptures. And Isaiah tells it so beautifully. His description is a description of all nations going up to Jerusalem, ascending to the mount of the Lord. It's a vision of the day when all peoples of the earth will be joined in recognizing their place in creation and their place under the guidance of the Creator. If there was a little bit of you that thought, gee, is that the shining city on a hill? Well, that's probably its deep ancestor. The shining city on a hill, which was, as we know, a speech by Reagan. I think a political convention speech, as I recall. Was also from John Winthrop and the Arbella at the founding of this nation. Its deeper roots then are in Matthew's gospel. But even Matthew is looking to this moment in Isaiah, this moment when God's light would be a beacon to the world, and the world would stream to the holy mountain to be united in the service of God. And it is a beautiful, beautiful vision, a vision of unity. But I think the deeper vision for me is actually Paul's vision this week. He talks about the night that is far gone, the day that is near, and he says, let us lay aside the works of darkness and put on the armor of light. And what Paul is trying to speak to, I think, is so important for us. Because if what Isaiah is saying is, don't worry, there will be a day when all God's people stream up that holy mountain, unified at last. What Paul is saying is the only way we're going to get to that holy mountain, the only way we're going to be unified, the only way we're going to finally come together won't be because something finally kicks in. God flips the switch. For Paul, what will happen is that God's people serve. God's people put on the armor of light. God's people take it upon themselves to be transformed and to transform the world little by little, piece by piece, bit by bit, spot by spot, situation by situation. God's people find a way to reach out and to do what we can do. And so while we're waiting for that great clarion call to join as one and go up that holy mountain, the key thing, my friends, the key thing for us as people of faith is to remember the way in which each one of us is called to live differently and to live more deeply and to be someone who carries the light of Christ, the light of God, the light of a deeper vision for all people in our own being, in our own way, and into our own places. I didn't know I was going to talk about lean on me also. But I think it reminds us. It reminds us that we need to be people who can be counted on. And the vision for our lives is the vision of friends coming together and assuring one another that whatever it is that may come, we are here for one another. That is what Paul understood to be the essence of the Christian life, to be people whom others could lean on, and to find in that great joy, great hope, and nothing short of the transformation of the entire world. There is an old gospel hymn that I will not sing. Yasmin's here, I don't want to look stupid. But it has the refrain, when the roll is called up yonder, I'll be there. We hear the roll call of the states. We are reminded of that which brings us together, or ought to. The roll call that matters most of all is the roll that's called up yonder. And the great challenge and opportunity of our faith is to make sure that when that roll is called, that we'll be there.